Aliens.
Right.
So, okay. We have any additional attendees?
We do. We have 6. No, 5.
Okay,
And it's 7 o'clock. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a special workshop specifically to discuss the budget. So there's no agenda. And I would just like to start by saying that I appreciate the trustees turning in lists of questions and issues ahead of time so that the treasurer could be prepared for tonight's meeting. I did notice that a bunch of them were questions about single lines changing from last year to this year. And I just want to point out that we're still working on getting the budget in the order that we want it in. There have been lots of changes. It's actually becoming fewer now that we're starting to get closer to where we should be. But we're still working on assigning things to the proper locations, which means that some expenditures change from one location to the other between years. And we're still working on the allocations. So particularly with DPW, which has several different functions, excuse me, we're trying to make sure that we get everything right in terms of what function it belongs in, as well as how we allocate staff time. Many staff members' time is allocated among different functions. So all of those things together, of course, with trying to get a better estimate of everything constantly, all of those things do result in single budget lines jumping fairly noticeably from year to year. Hopefully that will continue to slow down and those year-to-year comparisons will be more useful. But for the past couple of years, they haven't necessarily been particularly helpful. So with that caveat, I'm gonna just turn the meeting over to our treasurer. And I know she's gonna go through the questions that she's already received and talk about those things. And then we'll open it up for general discussion. And of course, since we have public, I'll ask for public comment at the end when we get done. So Julia, take it away.
Okay. I guess the order of which I'm going to conduct this meeting is the order in which I got the questions. That being said, there were 2 adjustments to the tax cap filing after the tentative was filed. One of them was just a pilot that was incorrectly utilized for the worksheet, budget worksheet that I utilized, but was actually filed correctly. So with that adjustment, it did cause a $1,000 difference, in which did not go in our favor. But the second one was actually a new exclusion with the PFRS system. And if you don't know what that is, that's the Police and Fire Retirement System. Because the increase of that exceeded that 2% that the state usually allows the municipality to make up, we did get a 1.9% exclusion on that, which did cause us to have a $9,000 in our favor. Now, all that to be said, that adjustment was towards the budget was $9,000, and we actually put it towards engineering fees for the water department. So you'll see that once we're done with this meeting and we put all of our numbers together for the proposed budget that you can, I guess, adopt April 26th. Okay, so the first set of questions that I received was from Trustee Cormos. So we'll begin with those questions. If there's any questions that you have while I answer these, then bring them up as they come. The first question was about projected fund balance. I think it was more of a statement than anything. I'm not sure if you want me to read through the questions.
Okay. I think the first 2 are more for later discussion about potentially, as you attended the comptroller's webinar, that we, develop a fund balance policy. You know, we're not anywhere near the danger level at this point, but I think it would be good in the future. You can just skip down to the third one.
Okay, the third one was one that I was able to answer ahead of time, but for the public, for them to be aware of what's going on. The question was government services without central garage and estimated benefits for fiscal year 2022 is $312,797 more than fiscal year 2021 projected. At a 55% increase, some expenditures, EI consultants, comprehensive plans belong in planning, not governmental support. This question was made aware to me, I want to say before the tentative was officially filed. And it's more of a judgment call of where we place this. And I did ask if other board members did want this change to be made, that I can make it. If not, if it's not a concern to the other board members, then we can leave it where it is. Again, it's more of a judgment expenditures, but if we do believe that we want to change it, we can go forward with changing that to the different department or budget line.
Yeah, I just think the plan, the consultant doesn't belong under, you know, basically, you know, the mayor's line versus the trustees line versus the treasurer's. It's an overall planning project, so I think it belongs there or some other general category instead of being assigned to, you know, one group of people essentially than another. I don't know what everybody else thinks about it.
That makes sense to me, that it should be in planning or with the mayor or in the mayor's line, not, where was it? With DPW, did you say?
No, it was in the trustees line.
In the trustees line, I see. Okay. All right, sorry.
I just didn't think it should be in any, you know, individual line. It's
Yeah, I mean, if we want to move it to the planning department, as it could be a planning, you know, comprehensive plan, as it's so stated, we can move it to the planning department. Obviously, it will have no effect on the budget since it's just moving between accounts in the A fund. The general fund.
That makes sense to me.
I think it makes
Yeah,
sense.
that seems logical.
Mhm.
If I may, just while we're on that topic, the contractuals on, you know, even without the comprehensive plan in the governmental services budget are quite high. Is, you know, or is there any particular reason for those being higher? I know we've added, you know, you've added personnel, but I was looking at the contractuals as also being quite
I'm
Right.
sorry, for what department?
for government services.
Government services.
I mean,
Let's see.
we've got some, I mean, you've got an increase in, let's see, mayor has a about $15,000 increase in contractuals.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of stated in some of the other questions going further that's been accumulated by the board. There has been the salary increases, but that's because of new positions in underneath governmental support, one of them being the municipal executive and also the position added for the building inspector's clerk assistant.
Yeah.
That being
Contractual expenditures, not personnel expenditures.
Yeah, there's been a series of additions to this. I mean, one of them, like as you mentioned, was the $50,000. Without completely pinpointing it right now, I wouldn't be able to tell you just because I don't want to stop the meeting too abruptly to figure out exactly the level and the amounts that are increasing governmental support.
Right.
Going on to the fourth question, proposed municipal executive should be under A 1230, which is municipal executive, as opposed to the mayor's line, which is 1210. I do agree with you. Of course, the tentative budget was already filed before I was able to make that change. And that being said, it is changed for the proposed budget that's up for adoption on the 26th.
Adjustment.
Then the fifth question, addition of government support personnel should be evaluated based on a total cost, benefits included. Again, this is kind of just a statement. Myself, I have internal worksheets that elaborate all the departments and the benefits that they are. That way it helps me better analyze and account for the total cost of benefits amongst the entire fund, which is how I have to look at it. So that is something that we are looking into with each additional personnel or in each additional job that we do add to the village.
Mhm.
Then we have another question about the comprehensive plan. And it states funding of comprehensive plan and infrastructure studies could be split between fiscal year 2021 and 2022. This is kind of like a long explanation, but I'll read it exactly how I was typing it out for my notes. We could split this between 2 fiscal years by moving the project to the capital improvement fund, which is also known as the H fund. There is no right or wrong way to do it. We can either fund it all in one fiscal year or move it to the capital improvement fund, Fund H. Again, it's just a matter of preference when you want to do it. Because of the amount of money it's going to take to execute this project, $50,000, it's kind of one of those things where it's not really worth it to split the expense into 2 fiscal years. That being said, any cost cannot be split if it's encumbered all in one invoice. So this comprehensive plan is going to, engineering fee. So if it's invoiced to us all in one, it's a $50,000 lump sum. I can't encumber that between 2 different fiscal years because that's how it's coming towards us.
Okay. A way sometimes to ease the burden on costs is to put it in more than one fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think I'm assuming later down the route, later down the line, there will be projects that would be this is something that we could do and fund it amongst multiple fiscal years. This one in particular, we were able to fund with being within the tax cap, and because of the cost, it's just not necessary at this point.
Mhm.
Okay, the fire department is the next question. It states fire department fiscal year 2022 expenses are $155,812 higher than fiscal year 2021 projected. And revenue is up $70,082, leading to a deficit of $61,576. Fiscal year 2021 had a deficit of $50,000 due to repairs taken from contingency funds. Majority is union equipment of $91,000 and building of $74,500. Some of the, statements or the amounts in that is a little bit off for what's actually in the fiscal year 2022 tentative budget. So the fire expense is $472,352 amongst the fire chief, EML, union, and fire police. The fire debt is an additional $181,000. And that total amongst what is actually being received by the towns is only a difference of $59,999. And that's
Still not
$60,000 over what is being received by the towns.
and
Now, that $60,000 is being taken out of fund balance because the departments are being overcome with a lot of expenses for building repairs. And that $60,000 taken from fund balance is being utilized for the repairs at Union for their concrete floors because it's in complete dismay.
I understand the building, but their contractuals are also up, and we didn't have a meeting with the fire department as part of our workshop, so I was wondering what those contractual expenses are, because it is an increase from the actual spent in 20.
If I could speak
Yeah.
to the floor question first. We own that building, and the floor in that building is and has been sinking. We suspect that there's some hydrologic activity underneath the building that's eroding the stuff that's supposed to be supporting the concrete slab. And our consultant tells us that we need to jackhammer the slab, remove the whole thing, investigate the ground underneath it, figure out what's going on, resolve that issue, and then pour a whole new floor. That's really at $60,000 estimated cost. That's really not something we expect the fire department to be able to pay for out of their annual operating budget. It's a major repair to a village building. It's a one-shot deal. And so therefore, I think it's appropriate to take it out of fund balance.
No,
So that's why we did it that way.
I agree.
Yeah, I can answer your other portion of that question though as well, Liz, because you pointed out that we are higher in their contractual expenses for the fiscal year 2022 versus what is projected. Some of the expenses currently in fiscal year 2021 that's been slowly coming in are repairs to the fire truck, which are totaling $37,000, $13,000 in repairs. So the projections of 131,000 for the year is going to be increased obviously as the year goes on. We have about a month and a half left. All of that being said, it was agreed upon. I'm sure the board was aware that the money or the revenue that we're receiving from the towns were going to go to the fire departments directly. So the difference of what was actually received by the towns for the tentative fiscal year 2022 budget is going directly to the fire departments. The only difference there is that $60,000 that Larry is stating that he's going to use out of fund balance to help Union repair for the help Union repair their floors.
Okay. May I ask a question? The repairs, and this is to the contractual, the repairs are to what truck?
This is in fiscal year 2021, so it's not in fiscal year 2022. It's just based off of the projections that I had in the tentative. There's been repairs for EMLs, ladder trucks. It's a really old truck that,
All right. Okay.
yeah,
So
but
it-
that's affecting this fiscal year. So the projections are just off based off of some of the numbers that are coming in now for repairs of the equipment.
So you're basically saying, except for the $60,000 to repair the floor, which I get, I hope we can do it for 60. Sounds scary, but in any event, that what the income is for fire protection is going to cover the expenses.
Correct. Yep,
Is that a correct statement? Okay,
that is correct.
okay.
Including debt service?
Correct. Yep.
Okay,
So that's what I was explaining. 181,000 for debt service and 472,000 for all other expenses, including personnel, equipment, building improvement, and the contractual that you see in the budget is all covered by the fire protection that we get from the towns, except for that $60,000 going to that one repair.
okay.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. I guess it's more of a statement about reserves for the fire department building repairs or anticipated purchase. I'm not aware of any future plans right now. I know reserves are something that I and Larry have been talking about and setting up. I think we need, a comprehensive understanding of what really needs to happen in the future years before putting together one, because it is a pretty big undertaking, and we want to make sure that we're setting up reserves for the right places and with a good plan in mind.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, the community emergency corps building, and, I assume whatever arrangements made, if that building does suit the court and police, which it looks like it may, that could be coming up within the next year, and we really don't have a plan to, how we gonna do that,
Mhm.
because I would assume that if we bought it, we'd finance it out over with a bond. But I think I agree with you. We need to start looking at those long-range expenses and how that fits into, budgets over the next years.
Right.
So,
Liz, one thing that I can't remember if I've mentioned to the board yet or not, is that I would like us to have a comprehensive facilities review fairly shortly here in order to come up with both a plan for our buildings and a prioritization of that plan. And I was hoping to put that on the agenda in May.
yeah, I fully agree. And
Absolutely.
yeah, we need long-range capital planning and financial planning to, take care of these big items that are, going to come along, that we'd like to be able to do.
And Julia and I have discussed reserves at great length because I've been trying to get us to put aside reserve funds.
Yeah.
And it turns out that the regulations on reserve funds make it such that if we set one up improperly in the wrong category or for the wrong reason, then we have wound up restricting funds that we might need to spend on something else.
I say reserves not in the formal sense of a designated fund. I mean, knowing we have how much money we need and having that access to that money. That's what not the formal, gee, we're going to put X dollars in this to buy this piece of equipment. I know you can do that, but until you know exactly, the details of what it's going to cost and stuff.
Well, yeah, the informal version of reserves, which I'm kind of interpreting what you're saying is kind of our, unreserved fund balance. Unfortunately, at this point, that's kind of the same classification. Like Larry said, it's a very tedious process of making sure that we set up reserves, official reserves, the correct way, so we don't get in a bind for setting up money that we no longer can use just because we set it up incorrectly. All that to be said, we are looking at extensive financial planning now that we know our financial stability at this point.
Mhm.
Now, Julia, you mentioned something about an engineering study for
Yes.
water.
Mhm.
What was the amount of capital that you set aside for that?
There was
29,000.
29?
Yeah.
Do you think that's enough?
That was the estimate from the engineer.
Okay.
There was also something you said, 21,000 for a well field study. Is that the same thing or is that an addition?
I believe that's an additional. We have had Wellfield reworking on the current fiscal year that we're in right now, fiscal year 2021, and unfortunately has not occurred this year. So we are just setting that up for the future year as well.
So that 29,000 for the water study is not in this budget, right?
I might have misspoken. I think it is the same money. If it's
Is it?
21 instead of 29, it's 21 instead of 29.
So that is,
Whatever it is, that's the engineer's estimate for the study.
so that's the study that will look at whether we need to, replace the John Street water tower or do something different, right?
Not clear to me that the water tower is specifically included in that. I'm meeting with the engineer tomorrow to clarify that. And if it's not included, then I will get another estimate that will include it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that a 21 or 29 wouldn't include a relocation and a redesign of the water network to go to a gravity system. That seems low.
Yeah.
And we may need to take a little bit more to make sure because that study's critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also think that, and I don't know whether necessarily we use the village engineer or if you want to put out an RFP, that we should consider setting aside money for stormwater and sewer as well to do an inventory if we haven't budgeted for that already.
Yeah,
I think,
we have, and I would put in the money that we just applied for. I think it's 36,000 for examining the sewer system. And on the off chance we don't get the grant, which we may not, that we would go ahead and examine the sewer system ourselves. Use the money.
yeah, I don't think we should wait on grants. If we get them, fantastic. But I don't think we can kick the can down the road anymore.
Yeah.
And we need these studies and the results if we were thinking about actually getting grants to do work, to actually do construction.
Agree.
I agree. I think we really need to look at this stuff.
Yeah, because then we will actually have real estimates, and then, when grants come along, we can apply for them. We
Or-
yes.
or if in the absence of grants, we'll know what it's gonna cost us in future.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of where we're budgeting right now is, the cost for engineering, so we can get an accurate representation of how much it's going to cost us. Just to kind of reiterate on what you said, Sean, it was originally $12,000 for the engineering fees. With that exception to the tax cap for the PFRS system, it increased that $9,000 up to $21,000 for that engineering study.
Okay. But we can find out if that's what the study is actually going to cost.
Right. Unfortunately, we just don't have those hard set money, but I'm taking notes down for what you guys are all saying.
So should we put in that 36,000 as a placeholder in case we don't get the grant for the sewers?
Right.
One thing about putting any additional money into the budget right now is that we only have a wiggle room of $425 with the adjustments to the tax cap without overriding the tax cap. Tax cap filing was submitted the other day as what it was without overriding it. I don't know where we would be if we were going to choose to override the tax cap to put in additional money in there.
What about the reserve fund? Where's that come into play?
I mean, right now, we've got something like 42% of our expenses is.
Yeah, I was talking about fund balance with our accountants EFPR, and they do recommend to have that 40% in there in the instance that whatever happens to our revenue gets slashed, just for that reserve to be able to account for expenditures. I don't know whatever's going to be. I'm sorry, what was that?
40% is a pretty high.
40% of the expenditures, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm proposing that we take additional money out of our fund balance at this point to invest in our future. And that's to do these studies and to put money in capital items. You're not considered to be in trouble by the comptroller until you are at 10% or lower. 20% is considered a comfortable fund balance. I think over 40% is, getting up there. There's even, recommendations that, and statements by the comptroller that too many villages are, have too much fund balance, that they're, but they need it for the future.
I'm of the mindset too, that both on water, stormwater and sewer, I mean, even if we set as much as 50,000 each for possible engineering studies or other work, inventories, considering our fund balance, if we don't use it, it's not like we're going to lose it. So
Yeah.
I don't see an issue with assigning it to those in seeking out getting those studies done, because we're a decade behind on getting those studies done. So while we have the opportunity and the funds to do it, I don't think it would be good judgment not to take care of it now.
One thing I would recommend is that just because what you're saying, it sounds like you want to utilize fund balance for this, since the engineers are coming out to study this project, would it be more beneficial for us to just amend the budget after it's been adopted to utilize fund balance versus changing the budget currently until we get that price from the engineering to see how much that's actually going to cost the village? The other portion to that, Sean was kind of elaborating that a little bit, is the fund balance for the G fund, the sewer fund, is a different tax base than the general fund. So we do have to elaborate or analyze how much fund balance is in that fund. So we can't allocate more money than we have in that fund. And that being said, the sewer fund balance isn't as
robust.
Yes.
How high is it right now? What is this?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I want to say it's around or below $50,000.
Yeah. Actually, that's one of my recommendations.
Yeah, and I do have some comment on that too when we get further down in your list.
Because but it should be building enough balance to pay for these things.
Okay, so help me understand this then. If we're talking about waiting, I think we can, well, let me not speak. Sean's spoken and Liz has spoken. Ben, I don't know if you have, but I am definitely in agreement that we should use, first of all, I think that this is a wonderful problem to have this amount, it certainly beats the problems we had in 2019 and in 2019 and 2020, and much of that is attributable to you, Larry, and Julia, and also Mary Lasky, and how you've handled all of this. So it's really a good problem to have. And thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Okay. So if we're going to do this, so we can't we can't take money from this fund balance. What you're suggesting is instead of taking money from the fund balance, if we did it now, we'd have to increase the tax cap. So you're suggesting that we
No,
do-
not no, we don't have, if you're set on utilizing fund balance for this project, it's not gonna have any effect on the tax cap, because what you're doing is taking out of what unallocated reserve we have right now, as of current year, fiscal year 2021, and utilizing that fund balance into fiscal year 2022. The only difference is, I guess, a logistics standpoint of, do you want to do it in our proposed and adopted budget once it gets to that point, or do you want to wait till we get that exact funding and we can, or exact number for what this could cost us, and just make an amendment to the budget after it's been enacted, I guess.
And your other proposal, use fund balance for sewer, it needs to be sewer fund balance?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
That's where we may end up short.
Yeah.
I mean, the sewer problem's going to be a problem in doing it in the proposed budget, or even once we get into the next fiscal year. So the sewer fund balance is going to be an issue regardless. But it's just a matter of logistics on what you want to utilize, and if we're all in agreement of utilizing fund balance for this project and when.
Do we know what's come in lately? Because we did flip the schedule at the last, such that larger users paid more.
That had no effect on the sewer rates, unfortunately. It was only on water rates.
No,
We're in the increasing scale. I did look at the rates that's in the local law, and the local law rates for sewer did not have that flip as water did.
it's supposed to. We voted on that. We voted to change the sewer rate schedule to
Do
reflect,
you know what, around what time that was? Month, year?
yeah, a few months ago. We voted on it to make it equivalent to the water schedule at half the cost of the water schedule. And that as you use more, you paid more. If that didn't get implemented, that's probably one of the reasons we're falling a
Well,
little.
I do remember this, I guess there is other problems surrounding this, and I did look into what was actually enacted by local law. I could be mistaken, and I'll have to go look to see when that was adopted by the board, to make sure that that was in fact supposed to be enacted, and what we need to go do going forward to make sure that that's fixed. But I don't believe that it was.
I believe the fee schedule has been changed.
The fee schedule, but that's different than the
Yeah.
sewer rates.
No, that is the rates.
Yeah. So I think that part's all set. The question is whether the state has formally accepted the
Ah,
not.
okay.
Oh,
And
so it didn't
We'll
get in this,
find that out tomorrow.
Yeah.
it didn't get in this last cycle, in other words.
We're
Yeah.
not,
Hoping it had.
yeah, but it didn't get into the billing this last cycle.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
We have to make sure it gets in, and maybe even look at adjusting the rates to pay for sewer needed, studies and even repairs. I mean, I hope we get the grant that will solve the study problem, but we have significant needs in both, sewer and stormwater is under the same category, right? Under the G fund.
Yep.
Well, I think stormwater's in the general fund, isn't it?
No.
No, it was changed last year.
Oh,
Yeah, it says, storm sewers, yeah. And we still, I believe, have major issues with our storm sewers. So we need,
Yeah, I mean, their first step is to do an inventory of their condition.
right,
And, you know, we can throw out an RFQ and see what kind of numbers we get back. But I mean, I guess Julia is, what are the negative and positives associated with waiting later to make an amendment? Or if we set aside budget in this budget and we have more than we needed for the engineering study, can it just be transferred back to the reserve fund or the
Becomes
fund balance?
Yeah, it's really no right or wrong. It's just what I guess is agreed upon.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. If there's no difference, just wait until you know what the cost is and then we can.
And
vote
that's
on it
kind of
then.
what I was suggesting. The
Okay.
only, I guess, one of the cons could be if we make that adjustment to the adopted budget, and it doesn't get utilized, now it is in the sewer fund at that point, if that's what we're going to utilize, or in the water fund. And in that instance, if something else comes up, it's more readily available to take in case, whatever mishap. So personally, I would rather leave it in fund balance until we know the exact cost. That way there's no, immediate need to just grab it, because it's just easier at that point once it's already been placed in the budget.
So Julia, I got a question. For the public, can you just let us know how much that fund balance is being added to in the current year? I don't know if you call it a surplus, and how much the total will be after this year?
I believe Liz kind of touched up on this before her incoming questions. I don't have the figures in front of me. What was projected was about, I want to say 400 or 500 for this fiscal year. Now, that being said, we have had a slew of expenses that have came in, regardless of it being anticipated or unanticipated, such as, emergency repairs and or equipment that we thought we might have pushed off. The current fund balance that we have as of our AUD that was filed for fiscal year 2020 was about 1.5. So if we can expect to take that projection, it could get up towards 2 million. But at this point, I don't think it is, just because of those unexpected expenses for this year.
Thank you. And just to clarify something, so if you have a sewer fund balance, you cannot use it for anything other than the sewer. I
That's
understand
correct.
that.
Same with the library.
But the general fund balance could be added to that, couldn't it?
No, because it's under a different.
If there's a study that costs 50,000, but we only have 40,000 in the sewer balance, we can't take from another general fund to pay for that?
No, it would have to be, we could in theory, but it would have to be paid back to the general fund with interest, because they're two different tax bases. One being a tax base for water and sewer, so utility bills. So that would have to be generated with revenue based off of utility bills, and then the general funds based off of tax bills and other, general revenues. So if money was taken from the general fund and pushed to the sewer fund, when the sewer fund creates excess revenue, they would have to be paid back to the general fund with interest.
and how did you allocate personnel to the sewer fund, since it's all from DPW?
Yeah, so that was kind of what Larry touched upon at the beginning of this meeting. We're still working on allocation, but I found that the amount that was allocated for fiscal year 2021 was just way off, both in personnel and in general overhead costs. So what I did was kind of just take a portion based off of the expenses that I've seen come through during this current fiscal year, and took that percentage and allocated it to the sewer fund, both with personnel along with contractual expenses as well.
For the water study, do we have enough in the water fund balance for that study?
We
The
don't,
water fund's currently in the general fund.
Oh, okay.
So that in sense, it's in our current general fund balance.
Okay.
Do we want to keep going back on the questions that were asked ahead of this, or do we just want to take it?
Yeah,
the next
let's
one
go
on
through these questions.
Okay. So the next question on the list that Liz gave me, I'm still working on that one, is an increase to safety inspection personnel. Jumped from $35,989 to $52,235. This was, again, in part to the addition of a part-time building inspector clerk that would work alongside with our current building inspector during the hours that he operates. The next one is if there's enough funds of maintenance of streets for crosswalk paint and sign replacement. The majority of crossings and many signs are unreadable. They should be added to the paving schedule. My general comment is that the DPW does have funds set aside for both signs, but at the same time, they do general road painting every year. So that is being calculated in the money that we.
Well, frankly, I just did a survey of all the crosswalks in the village. And the majority of them are you can't see them from a car. I don't know if they've been doing painting. I haven't seen it. I mean, the only ones that are actually completely visible are the ones on the state highway, on the state roads. So I think that is I didn't pay that close attention to it before, but I was asked, for the transportation to count how many crosswalks we had. So I, rated them, and they're in terrible shape. You can't see many of them. Even downtown, you can see the fading and stuff. And then there are signs that are completely unreadable. I mean, this is not, I believe, very costly. I don't know if it's an issue of putting it in the budget, the supplies, or it's an issue of DPW ability to get this work done. But, I'd like.
The latter. We do have money specifically earmarked in the budget for sign replacement. We don't have money specifically earmarked for paint, but we certainly buy paint when we need it. And that's sort of an expenditure. But the time has been considerable.
Yeah.
I would assume we hire a striping contractor when we do our highway work.
I don't know.
I don't know that either.
I don't think we do, but I don't know either.
Yeah, I mean, because if we use a striping contractor, you could just add it on to when they're repainting streets that get paved, you could add it on for them to do crosswalks. That's probably the most economical way to do it.
Yeah, I just think it's something it's one of those things that has been neglected in the village. It's a safety issue. We actually need some more crosswalks in some areas where there are none, but at least to refresh the ones we have, starting with the ones that you can actually, even if you walk up to it, you can hardly see it. I think it's a safety issue and we should address it.
I agree. It's definitely a need. I don't know if it's a budget item or not, but
yeah,
I don't think we should wait till. Yeah, but I don't know that we need to wait for a road to be paved and that contractor to come. I think we should I think on Ballston Ave, I think the village did it internally. I think it was village people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of the issue, if and I don't know, particulars, if Jeff's not using a certain grade epoxy paint, they're going to disappear every winter. So if the striping contractors use that epoxy paint, so that's also something to consider.
Yes, I was wondering the same thing, Sean, because the Ballston ad is also already pretty faded. Like it went pretty quick.
Yeah, it's an issue, but I think it's something maybe, Sean, with your liaison to DPW, it's something that should be raised up a little bit higher for attention. Actually related to that, I'd like to know how much we have in the budget for trees, for removing, stump grinding, trimming, replacement. I didn't ask that specifically in the workshop, but that is, again, something that's becoming more highlighted with the grant we've got. And we have a lot of, stumps sticking up, which, are unsightly, also not real safe for people. And, we need to, address those issues and actually have some budget to replace a few trees every year.
Yeah, currently, the expenses do go against the DPW departments. In the instance that we want to track it separately, all we need to do for the upcoming budget would be to make a transfer of funds and create that department so we can be better aware of exactly how much it's costing the village to make those tree repairs.
Yeah, I just wondered how much in the budget now.
We don't have anything specifically allocated. That being said, it's just been an expense that hit one of the DPW departments, and I want to say streets.
Maybe Sean find out to that how much we actually. I mean, I know Jeff, sends out asks for a tree company to come in periodically and do that work. So
yeah, it's been very little.
Yeah,
but I have seen one or two come in over the past year.
Yeah. So
Jeff wouldn't have that total, but Julia could search on the vendor and pull it up pretty easy.
Yeah, it's.
Are we anticipating a fund balance for this next year as well? Not a surplus in the annual.
On generating the budget, we anticipate the revenue coming in based off of history and any upcoming events, and the same with expenses. Generally, the idea of putting together a budget is all the revenue that we're taking in is being expended. So that being said, we don't anticipate a fund balance. Fund balance is made up of not utilizing the revenue that's coming in. And that's how it's been in previous years.
Let me add that we do have to budget some things conservatively. For example, insurance rates are notorious for going up 10%, 15%, and we don't know what they're going to go up to until January or December maybe. So there is some budgeting that we have to do to protect ourselves from that kind of thing, that in an ordinary year, not all of those things would go up that maximum amount, and we would have a little bit left over. But we didn't create this budget specifically to have leftover money in it.
Yeah.
Right, and we didn't
As we've done the last 2 years.
So last year also, last year you also budgeted to break even, but we ended up with 400 or something thousand.
No, the last 2 years I was trying to build the fund balance.
Okay.
So, okay.
I mean,
We can't do that this coming year? Are we going to build the fund balance this coming year?
Well, we do have a contingency in place for unexpected expenses. That being said, if the contingency is not utilized, it would get rolled into fund balance. So that quote unquote could be, our buildup, but also, as you know, from this fiscal year, if unexpected expected expenses come up, it would be utilized. But
And how much is that? Is that fund?
we have 100,000 in the contingency account,
Yeah.
same as last year and current year.
So I
Thanks.
think this is more the year to spend than to build, because we now built to a level that we can afford to spend some of it.
Right,
Some of these
right.
long items.
But there are things, for example, and Larry mentioned insurance. In 2021, our insurance premium increase was 3%. And the reason is that because of the pandemic, people weren't utilizing the healthcare system. So it's anybody's bet what it's going to be in 2022, just as they're expecting, the economy to take off. I think so possibly will our health insurance.
Right.
Yes.
So we do kind of have to take into consideration all those when we're putting together how much a certain department will expend in contractual and even building improvements, because quite frankly, unless we have the quote in front of us, we don't know how much it's going to cost us. And that's how it generates a fund balance, if this comes up short or if we generate a surplus revenue. If we can move on to the other questions, because I have about 40 or 45 questions to get through, and we're already about 45 minutes through it.
I'm wondering if we should focus on some of the bigger items that we've all wondered about. I don't know, Liz. I mean, you have a lot of questions, but
No, actually, some of them she can skip, but this next one, I this is a proposal, is our sidewalk fund. Our sidewalk fund is what, $5,000? And over the years, it's only, the highest, I think it was 10,000, and that's to pay, which is now about, I think, 30% of the costs and I guess according to our code, it was an issue as to whether it's only for a new sidewalk. What I'm proposing is that we make that village portion be what it used to be. A number of years ago, it started out as 50%, and to have it cover both new sidewalks and repairs. Actually, I would almost prefer if it would cover repairs more than it would cover new, except in areas where we have gaps, where there's sidewalk and then there's an empty lot and then there's a sidewalk, to try to encourage, our residents to pay half the money and get some improvements. I know we want to go for some big grants down the line and all that, but, I think this is a fund, I think it's been there since the 60s or something, and is now, less.
That's a question of changing our local law and our policy. That's not a question of this annual budget.
Well, it is if we want to put some money in it.
So what is it now, and what do you want to?
$5,000 at the current reimbursement covers 500 feet sidewalk. That's all. It covers nothing.
And we didn't expend it last year, and we didn't expend it the year before, simply because people didn't apply for it.
Well, because people didn't know.
So why would we increase? That's what you said last year. You said that last year. We increased it last year, and nobody applied for it. We didn't spend it.
People don't know about it.
Well, tell them.
Okay, but I think if we tell them, they're going to start applying. I think a lot of people, if they knew they could get.
Well, that's what you said last year.
Huh?
That's what you said last year.
Well, we didn't do anything.
We did increase it. Now I'm dropping it again. We didn't spend it.
Well, the thing is, if we put it aside and we don't spend it, it goes back into fund balance, but we've allocated dollars. And if we put the word out that there is money, I think people, and particularly if we change the code to provide money for repair, some sort of formula, percentage of repair, and it, make it a little bit more visible. I think there are people in this village who will repair their sidewalks. And we'll find out if we publicize it and if we provide money for repairing.
Would this be something that would also fall into the category of a budget amendment after the fact to see if the fund gets exhausted?
I'll be honest, if the fund gets exhausted even by $5,000, it's not worth a budget amendment. It's just worth taking out of a different department.
Yeah, we're not, I don't believe that fund balance is appropriate for minor expenditures like a sidewalk. That's not a long-term big ticket project that we need to save up for.
Well,
That's for every year.
If we were committed to spend $50,000, that's a big item. That's what I'm suggesting. We put aside $50,000 for paying half of the repairs and replacements of sidewalks.
Well, yeah.
We could
Change the law first.
Well, then they have to wait another year to have the money. And
Well, if it does get overexpended, we can make that transfer, but up until now, we don't really have the wiggle room to add an additional $45,000 to the budget. And I think that's where Larry's coming from with changing the law first before putting it in the budget.
You don't think that would help for it to come out of fund balance? Capital, a good sidewalk will last you 25 years at least. It's capital. It's not a contractual, it's not a recurring expense. So it's
also not a $500,000 expense.
Do you want to put $500,000 into sidewalks?
No, but I think we've got other projects that are in that range.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to save for.
Mhm.
Not to replace a sidewalk here and a sidewalk there, but to buy a new building or to build a new DPW facility here. Those
I
are the
mean,
kinds of things that
yeah.
are big ticket, one-time items that I think we ought to be spending fund balance on.
Liz, I think maybe we should go back to the legislative drawing board on that. I know we discussed it a while ago and we kind of dropped it, but maybe we should refocus this year on it and come up with, I know you mentioned something about a sidewalk fund, whatever the particulars of that would be, to generate revenue for the balance that you're talking about. I mean, yeah, it's another year, but apparently there isn't a lot of people knocking down the door if we haven't used any of our 5,000 in the last couple of years that we set aside. I mean, I granted that if you repaired all the sidewalks to meet DOT specs and filled in the gaps in the village, it's well over $100,000 worth of work. But
Well, we have 84,480 feet of sidewalks in this village. And I probably guess that a good 20% of them need repair at least. And then there's the gaps in between, where, I mean.
I could see putting more than 5,000 in a budget for sidewalks. I think 50 is too ambitious based on the history of use, but it is important. It is expensive. But you're right. We don't know if there's a demand to use it. So I wouldn't increase it by a lot this year, but maybe we can do some extra work to publicize and promote and see if we can get the money spent, whatever it is.
Well,
I agree. I think 50,000 is entirely too much. I would think more like 10 tops. And I also think when you got it, the other issues like the sewer and the water are so much more important. I mean, you don't want to be putting new sidewalks over something that's, I have this fear that streets are just going to collapse because of the, what's not being taken care of underneath them. So, that's all we need is to put a new sidewalk on top of something that's not sound.
well, no, I agree. We should coordinate, where sewer and water lines are, if they're running under a sidewalk, not to replace the sidewalk and then tear it up. That's part of trying to correlate your projects. But, the real point is that people aren't doing it because we don't enforce the code.
Well, let's move forward this year by changing the law and really promoting the 5,000. If we are able to get rid of that 5,000 and spend it, next year we have a great case for doubling or whatever we want, something in addition. This could be a year where we really, like I said, just change the law and try to spend what we have with the idea of making a case for the following year.
Well, would you be interested in taking it up to 10,000?
I'd be comfortable with that personally, but
The only dilemma with that is that we would have to pull the money from a different department.
not the fund balance.
Okay,
I wouldn't suggest that, no.
all right, then I think Ben is right. As far as I'm concerned, we change the law, we see what it takes, what works, and we keep
Okay.
it in mind for next year.
Next one.
Yes, next question is about a $200,000 transfer to capital fund or project fund. I think Larry can elaborate on that debt in that project.
That's the village hall work. Last year, as the board will recall, I tried to replace the dry rotted wood on the front of Village Hall and have the thing painted. And the board wouldn't approve that expenditure and insisted that we do a structural and environmental evaluation of that building, which we did. And that structural evaluation turned up a handful of things that the engineers need to be repaired. One is the retaining wall at Bath Street, which is structurally unsound and needs to be replaced. One is the sidewalk on the Bath Street side of the building, which currently slopes towards Front Street and water pools up against the building. on the southeast side of the building, resulting in rot and other issues there. So they want to take out the sidewalk, regrade, put in a drain at that end, change the grade so that it drains downhill, and replace the sidewalk. Then there's a chase under the front sidewalk on Front Street of no known function, but obviously some historical reason for being there. That would
Larry,
not.
Would you, a chase, could you, a what? I mean, it's a
cavern,
vault, right? They call it a vault?
It doesn't have a door. Well, call it whatever you will. It's a void under the
Void.
sidewalk.
Void, okay, void under the sidewalk, okay.
But if somebody drove up on the sidewalk by accident, their car
Yes.
might well go through.
Mhm.
So they're proposing to do that. And then that quote also includes the facade work, which is a complete replacement of the facade on Bath Street, which, as I said, is badly rotted from water damage and also has a variety of mal-fitted doors and windows and cob jobs that have been accumulated through the years. And last but not least, the replacement of the dry rotted wood on the Front Street facade and a paint job there. And the estimate for that combined work was 184,000, and I rounded it up to 200 because, well, a couple of reasons. One, they have tended to be light on a couple of other projects, but that's what the 200 is. It's the work on Village Hall.
As I remember, a number of years ago, they replaced that sidewalk in front of the Village Hall with a heated sidewalk.
Yes, they
Yep.
did, yes.
Is that going to be replaced?
Yep.
with the heated sidewalk?
No, we're going to go in from the inside, from
Oh,
the
okay.
basement.
So
It's not going to affect the sidewalk.
you're not removing the sidewalk that exists? Or you are?
Not on Front Street. Not on Front Street.
Oh.
On
But
Bath Street,
Bath.
on Bath.
The lower sidewalk on Bath Street, right against the building.
but that's also
No,
heated.
no, he's saying the part that's against the building. So when you go down the stairs, when you go down the stairs next to the storefront, you're talking about that sidewalk, Larry?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
not the one up at
You're
the,
not talking about the pedestrian sidewalk, if you will.
I
You're
was
not talking,
wondering, is that
We're not
new
touching the,
sidewalk gonna get torn up? That's all.
no, he's,
no.
Okay,
thank you.
glad to hear it.
Okay, next questions, debt service. Debt service isn't necessarily increasing the two debts that we do have, which the current board, which was a board for this current year, minus Ben. We have the two debts. One's for the fire truck that was totaling 181,000 plus a few extra $100, and then the one for the consolidation bond for 151,000. There is no additional debt besides that transfer for capital projects for that 200,000, and that's could be what you're looking at in the total debt service.
That's fine.
So could we just go back to the Village Hall for one, the 200,000? So this is, who estimated that this work would cost 200,000? It's
Chazen.
Chazen. Okay. All right, well,
Okay, the next question is sewer fund expenses being reduced $66,000 in fiscal year 2022. As Liz stated, more of a statement here, to match the estimated revenues projected. Loss is $142 in fiscal year 2021 with debt service and estimated benefits. The village should examine increasing in fees to cover expenses. One of the decreases in current expenses for the sewer fund is related to that new allocation. That being said, I think we elaborated on it a little bit earlier that the sewer rates, one, I'm going to look to make sure that that local law was accepted by the state, but two, just to analyze it if and for whatever reason those did not increase the way that we intended them to be. That's when we'll bring it back to the board for review of those rates.
Yeah. Up them.
The next question is more of a statement again. DPW overall budget lines, only a $77,000 increase over fiscal year 2021. As you are all aware, there's been retirement and additions to the DPW that entail kind of negates itself. The newer employees come in are less than those that are retired. And then the increase to the DPW personnel is 2 additional employees, again, at the lower incoming rate. That being said, a lot of the expenses for the DPW for the current fiscal year 2021, those that have not been completed are being budgeted again for fiscal year 2022. And any big expenses that have been expended, we're hoping to keep the budget sort of in the same moving line and put that money into additional equipment and capital projects for fiscal year 2022. So that being said, there's not a significant increase in overall.
Equipment requests from them that are in the 2022 budget.
We do have equipment budgeted. I can't off the top of my head remember exactly which projects that those were. But we do have some equipment budgeted that kind of quote unquote replaced what was budgeted for this fiscal year. If you want me to get you kind of what equipment is budgeted, I'll be happy to do that.
General thing that there aren't any great needs that aren't being, you know, with this budget, that they have the need for a certain piece of equipment, because, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about DPW needs equipment.
Yeah, and a lot of the equipment, as we go down to some,
we're replacing a dump truck bed. We're replacing
The
an additional
new,
fuel dispenser,
back, right?
yeah,
getting-
fuel dispenser,
salt shed.
salt shed.
The vacuum truck or the attachment. I know they're doing that.
There's some attachments to equipment, but not necessarily classified as equipment. But yeah, a lot of those projects kind of are into next year as well.
Yeah, we
mean,
asked Jeff to give us the next list of priorities equivalent to the amount of money that was budgeted last year. So
Okay,
that he did. That's
Yeah.
what we're planning to spend.
good, good.
One of them, again, is also kind of a question and statement. No funds for storm sewer repairs. As Liz elaborated on earlier, there is some major issues. I'm not well educated in the storm sewers. I do know, just based off of the expenses that I see and some, you know, general communication with Jeff, storm sewers are generally, you know, catch basin repairs, you know, when we're doing paving and so forth. I don't have, I guess, much more comment on expenses that we need to budget for without a conversation to Jeff, DPW supervisor.
I don't know if you want to comment on that. I mean, we have this catch, but then there are recurrent stormwater issues in the building, all the slopes we have and rain running down into people's basements and all of that stuff. So,
Well, yeah, I guess the big issue here is we don't know what we don't know.
right.
And until we can actually do a comprehensive inventory of our actual sewer or stormwater pipes, to see if I know there was talk of cross contamination. So, I mean, all that needs to be identified. And then once you identify it, you know, you need an engineering study and how do you, you know, to create a solution and then a design. So a lot of that, I think right now, again, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but we need to do the studies and the inventory so that we can then assess what kind of monies we need to budget
Yeah.
for repairs.
And unfortunately, we're constrained because it's under the sewer G fund and we don't have any money in there.
Correct.
So,
Going on to the next one. One of them is just no allocation for training of staff. I touched base on this a little bit. We did put $3,000 in the mayor's line, and the reason why we did that is because the mayor's budget doesn't get hit so many times as some of the other departments who would utilize the training. It's just going to be as easy as moving that money in a budget transfer, as you guys are so well used to now.
Christine, is that
Pardon?
enough?
I think that's a good, a good beginning. There's a lot of training that you can do that's free.
Yeah.
And so I think that should.
And online these days, so you don't have to pay for travel and.
Right.
the
Yeah.
expenses.
Okay.
The next one is funds for an annual audit. We have $8,500 budgeted under the treasurer's budget of a 1325.4. Funds for a water study, again, we kind of touched base on this earlier. We have 21,000 budgeted in there. Again, that's different than the tentative, just because there was that $9,000 increase to the tax cap based off of that one exclusion. We do also have 6,000 budgeted in the sewer fund under G 8120.4, the contractual line for the EPG grant. If that grant does not get approved, we'd be able to utilize that money for an engineering study.
Would somebody please help me? What is EPG? Would you tell me what that stands for so I can rack my memory?
What now I'm trying to remember. Environmental Protection Fund. No.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Grant. Yes.
Okay. That grant. Okay.
$36,000 grant to send the cameras through the sewer system.
Okay. And that's in progress or?
No. That's an application, and the 6,000 is our match if we get the grant.
And so we haven't applied yet.
No, we applied if we haven't heard.
We haven't heard, right? It's like my records management grant.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Well, this one just went in recently, so hopefully there'll be an announcement. I'd have to check as to when, but that would allow us then, we would invest 6,000 and they
Okay.
provide the rest, and we could get the study done.
I'm glad you brought that up, Christine, because that's another thing. Should we set aside that, or is that a budget amendment at a later date?
Again, that's in the G fund, so without fund balance, we wouldn't be able to make that amendment. Again, it's also in the G fund, so there's not any wiggle room there to expend more in the budget without taking from another item.
Yeah, so she put it in the G fund. Assuming that we'd get the grant, wishful thinking. Let's hope you're right.
The next one is funds for Committee on the Arts. This was touch base on the last board meeting. We do have $1,000 budgeted for banners and 1,000 for birdhouses. What you do currently see in the budget as being expended or year-to-date expenses are money that was raised by that committee for grants and fundraising.
Well,
So that's why there's a difference in what you see projected.
in the beautification fund, I believe, but there is no money at all for the Committee on the Arts to spend.
Correct.
And the reason being they didn't ask for any, we don't expect them to be
Correct.
any. So if they come up with a project, there's nothing in the budget, we'd have to do a transfer
Yeah.
Or they have to raise funds.
or raise funds. I mean, do we feel comfortable having nothing for that group?
I mean, I was hoping they'd come. I actually talked to them a week or more ago and suggested if they have a budget, now's the time to present it. So if they haven't sent anything in,
Yep.
then we don't know what their needs are. They have the opportunity, but if they're not gonna, right now, they're just planning to fundraise and take it out of their own pockets. And I told them, you could have asked for some funds, but if they haven't come forward.
I guess it's on them.
Yeah.
The next one is funds for Wiswell, Iron Spring, Kelly Park, equipment improvements. I don't have much information on future plans for this, so I don't really have much comment.
Yeah, I've been recently, I just put in that application for the Lowe's hometown grant, and then I did a rough budget, the complete Wiswall redo we'll run something on the order of $150,000 to redo all the paving and do pavilions and lighting and all of it. Now, what we'd like to do this year is get a start on that project to get the removal of the material that's there, the overgrown bushes, there are a number of trees that should come down, excavation of all the invasive weeds and putting some soil back and stuff. Part of it, and the other one would be to move the spring, the end of the pipe for the string over to the corner, such that we could then, at some point raise the money and have an actual feature. What I'd like to see is some initial investment by the village to get the project started. To pay for the materials. It's not that much materials, it's more, frankly, DPW time. Ray Otten believes we can get some shared services from the town of Milton that they're willing to do some work on this project. It really depends on if the village would like Wiswall to continue to be what it is, or would like to see it improved.
I think it's a bit late to be trotting in new things at this point for this budget.
Well, that's what budget workshops are for, and that is capital expense. I believe it could come out of the fund balance. If you want the park to continue as it is, for one, the farmer's market has moved down so that we can start some work. I'd like to see some investment. I mean, it is the village's park. It's in the center of the village. It's what everybody walks by. Rotary is ready, was willing to donate benches, but they don't want to put them in, and then have them taken out again.
How much would
I don't disagree with taking better care of Wiswall Park, but we don't have a budget. We don't have a plan, and it's a week before we have to approve the budget for next year. I just think the timing is not real good here.
Well, then it waits another year, and we have $2 million in a fund budget, in a fund balance, and
we don't have to spend it all this year,
I'm not saying, I mean, even if we took another 100 or 150 out of that, our fund balance would be like 33% or whatever of our expenditures, a very healthy fund balance. I know we want to invest in the studies, et cetera, for DPW, but, I look at revitalizing Wiswall as part of economic development. That's what, people come downtown and they see this basically shabby park in the middle of our village. It does not reflect well on, it's a little bit like the signs are faded. I mean, we have this neglect, and the park is part of it. And part of it is that invasive weed, which requires, somebody to dig out about a foot or more of soil to get rid of that weed, unless we're willing to use chemicals, which I'm not really in favor of in a public park.
Well, do you have a defined sort of stage one that could be done this year that is not 150,000, but
Oh, no, I'm not asking for 150. I think if the village could put 25,000 in and get this initial work done. If we don't spend it, it stays there. But the idea, what I'd like to see is get everything torn up as it needs, reseed the grass, and have the central path that exists, it's a little different shape in the plan, have that put in. And then, we can get volunteers to do plantings and, put in some flowers and all that. And
Liz, is
Right.
this work going to be contracted out?
No, we're hoping we can get
Yeah, that's a false hope if you think it's DPW.
Well,
They don't have the time for it.
they're getting another 2 workers.
Yeah, but they have to train them this year. They're really actually going to, you know, they'll help in certain aspects, but with the first year of training and getting them
They're
set up.
also down one. They're down one, so they really have to hire 3.
No, I understand the current situation. I'm talking about once they staff up, that they can't, you know, spend a day or 2 in the park getting it excavated and putting
A
new
day.
soil in.
It sounded like what you're talking about is a couple of weeks' work.
No,
So if you're gonna excavate a foot down throughout,
not
and
wow,
excavate
no.
to put a pipe 4 feet down,
Well, the pipe is a bit of work, yeah. But how long did it, you know, I mean, they did some repairs recently.
yeah, I guess my thoughts are is that if they ended up with free time, then absolutely. You know, that would be something to consider, but you also have to consider that that whole area is gonna have to be cordoned off and, you know, so people don't go in there.
Right.
Uh,
No,
yeah.
I mean, that's why BSBPA moved everything down to Brookside. So that we could work on that park this year.
What are you doing with a pipe? Do you need to do the pipe this year? I mean, can you stage it? What is the,
Well, the thing is if you excavate and
yeah,
put in everything, I mean, I don't know how deep that pipe is and how it's rooted.
you want
But
to move the spring or what are you doing?
yeah, move the spring to the front corner so that eventually we can create a pavilion over it, which the Rotary would like to pay part of. You know, the rest is going to be fundraising and a grant. You know, I think
Yeah.
we can get a grant for a good portion of the project. You know, to do new lighting, to you know, have pavilions, some furniture, etc. You know,
Yeah, the water pipe's gotta be 4 feet down at a minimum. And does that cross any sidewalk in the,
it does to get over to Wiswall, but I'm thinking if they could route from where it is now down to the corner. you
yeah,
know.
but wouldn't it cross sidewalk to do that, internal sidewalk?
No, it's in the middle of
No.
the park. It's still gonna be in the park. It's just gonna be on one corner.
And I don't think that's what Sean's saying, is not the path in the park. Are you talking about if you're gonna move it? If you're gonna move it to, as you face the park, are you gonna move it to the right-hand corner?
No, if you're standing at Iron Roost, it moved to the left corner where the BSBPA table always is.
Okay, well then, if that's what you're doing, to Sean's point, he's right. You're gonna have to tear up. You're gonna have to tear up the walkways.
Yeah,
that
the
are in
walkway is needs tearing up. That's part of the.
So your proposal is, just so I understand, your proposal is, which is what Ben is calling stage 1, which is, I think, a good way of expressing it, is to take care of this vegetation that's run amok, to take up the paths
Right.
and to move the pipe. Are you going to replace the paths with anything?
Yes, with brick. We hope to replace it with brick pavers.
Well, is that gonna be done after the work's done?
Yeah, that would
Could
be part, depending on how much money we've got, we can do the path. You know, with the ultimate plan, if you've looked at it, has a paved area in the back, you know, for a new pavilion and stuff, but I'm proposing just the path itself, similar to what is there now. You know, and a 5-foot wide path that goes around, but have it done, you know.
Yes.
So we put it back, but eventually those brick pavers would be torn up again, correct?
No,
No,
not if the pipe is moved to the right place. If it someday they tear up Front Street and reroute the pipe, they can directly take it over to there and they wouldn't touch any of the park part. But I don't want to wait until they redo Front Street to have that spring, you know, in the corner.
Okay.
What sort of impact do you think is going to have on the budget though? Because it sounds like if you're trying to get the village to fund any of it, then at this point in the process, it would have to be fund balance, but it still sounds like a lot of things are up in the air. So
Well,
if you don't mind moving on from this subject to keep it from creating an excess discussion, which could be more beneficial at a board meeting than at the budget workshop, then I suggest we move along from this discussion.
Yeah, good.
Agreed.
okay,
Okay, the next one is status of the pool, no equipment or capital funds. We do have $5,000 in engineering studies. A lot of the contractual expenses that we have is directly based off of historical data and what the pool supervisor did present to us in terms of what is needed for the upcoming budget.
Right, but the budget does show, and it was in Ben's questions that I mean, I
Yeah,
guess Liz asked it
The
too, but Ben-
expense went, I have it in front of me.
Right,
The expense went from 57,000, it looked like, to 93,000,
yes,
is that?
that's what's in the budget. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, that's what you have.
Yes, I was just answering on Liz's question originally, but I do have an answer for that. The pool's budget was 78,000 in fiscal year 2021, 47,000 for personnel and 30,000 in contractual. In fiscal year 2022, we're budgeting 93,000 total, as what you're saying is shot up to, which is 58,000 in personnel and 34 in contractual. The increase in personnel is approximately 11,000, and that's based off of the unknown of where minimum wage is going to rise to, as well as, I'm sorry, that's not the point there because minimum wage isn't for this till next year. But also this current fiscal year, we did budget a little bit lower in anticipation of, we didn't know where the pandemic was going to go. Now, that being said, again, we don't know how it's going to impact this current year. Hopefully not as hard as it did in this fiscal year. So therefore we are increasing the amount of hours for pool staff. It's about a little under 5,000 increase in contractual. And again, that's due to us budgeting $5,000 for engineering study, because I believe there's probably an underlying issue with the pool, and we got to get to the root of what it is and how much it could potentially cost the village.
Okay,
We didn't have swimming lessons last year either. So that,
yeah. We probably need to look at the revenue side of the pool to, like other departments, if they have a revenue source, they should at least attempt to cover their expenses with that revenue source.
I agree, that is something that should be looked into. Again, this year was not a great year to look at just because of no swimming lessons and because of COVID. Moving on to the next one, you state there's a dramatic increase in retiree benefits. Retiree benefits, as you see it on the account, is not just retiree benefits, it's also post-employment benefits. That being said, Larry kind of brushed upon it earlier. We don't know what the increase is going to be for health insurance, so we do try to anticipate a larger increase. I anticipated about 10%. Again, that could be right on line, it could be fall short, or it could be a little bit more for the increase at the end of this calendar year. That being said, we do have an inactive employee that does receive COBRA benefits, and in that point, that does increase this line exponentially, but it is also offset by another revenue account, which if you looked into, I think another board member asked the same question, why that jumped up. But that's why there is a dramatic increase in the quote unquote retiree benefits line of a 9089. Next one is the status of completing capital inventory. We are looking at that right now, and actually I am in the depths of it immediately right now for insurance purposes. I'm trying to get it the way I want it. I also want to get it the way insurance wants it. So we're still working on that one.
Okay.
The next one is mentioned about fund balance. Just let me read this over a little bit.
Basically saying.
Probably touched upon it a little bit.
Spend the money on studies, and also to look at the capital, the buildings as Larry mentioned earlier, and to really look at the financial feasibility of various moves, such as moving police and court.
Right, and I think that should have been a little bit more emphasis on some of the discussions we had further in the anticipation of utilizing fund balance. I think the board needs to get together to make sure the prioritization of how we utilize it is in the best interest of the village. That being said, that would be beneficial on some of the analysis and inventory that you were asking about, Liz.
Now,
Yeah.
one idea that Sean had related to cattle buildings is a survey of the land that the DPW might move to, which I think is a good idea to set the stage for that possibility. Is so, Sean, you were talking about how much that might cost.
Yeah, again, I mean, if you were to do surveys to the point where, you know, if you wanted somebody to do a site development at that location, you're probably talking in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. You'd have to do topographical, and that would also include wetlands delineation, which I think we should do, just so that, you know, we know how much acreage we actually have to use. You know, a topographical survey would also help in site development. So, I mean, if we're thinking of moving forward, and again, you know, we do have a healthy fund balance. You know, you do the survey, you know, it's not going to go away, and things aren't going to change significantly. So even if it's 5 or 10 years down the line, it's not like we would necessarily have to do another one. So it was just food for thought.
Mhm.
So
Unfortunately, you know, you have to spend money on these upfront studies and surveys, et cetera, in order to make an educated decision on whether you put a piece of property, put a new building on a piece of property, and that's your upfront cost. It's not that much different than, you know, you buy a house, you got to pay for this, you got to pay for that.
So I would agree to using some fund balance towards that purpose.
I think we need to make our facilities plan as a board,
Right.
and assuming that facilities plan includes this project, and assuming that this project is a high priority in that plan, then we need to have some conversations with the town of Malta because they control the zoning on that parcel. And I've already had one discussion with their planning director, and she said as soon as your board has a firm plan, get back to me and we'll start working on it. But that would require some zoning variances, and that would require some cooperation with the town. So we've got several steps that we need to take before we're ready to actually do anything on that property. And I would suggest that we could probably get all those things done this year.
Yeah,
Okay.
I look at this year.
I don't want to put money into that property until we know that we can use it.
Mhm.
Okay, moving on is one of the questions was if the village has capacity to borrow funds for the purchase of potentially other purchases of property and buildings. One of the things is that the village, since we just recently in the last 2 years got caught up with a lot of prior year AUVs and financials, that number still is currently up in the air and unknown. Not only that, I am working on calculating the our debt limit, and that is done after we do submit for the official tax cap and adoption of the budget. Until I have all those pieces together, I don't know. I will say I did reach out to other municipalities to see if they have any quote unquote credit monitoring services that they utilize and trust, because a lot of them do come at a fee. But I am looking into that to see exactly where the village stands in terms of purchasing power.
Yeah.
And I think those two projects that you specifically listed, that is buying the emergency core building and building a new DPW facility, I think those are things that we could realistically expect to accomplish using fund balance. And I think those are both perfect uses of fund balance. So one-time, long-term major expenditures. That's what I would, and if we're going to be able to do $200,000 or $300,000 a year, well, I think $200,000 or $300,000 would do each one of those things.
Well, I mean, you're not assuming paying for them outright, because we don't have enough.
Yeah.
No, we don't have enough fund balance to buy a building. We've got
Yeah, we do.
$2 that would wipe out our, I mean, these buildings, we should use. The fact is, we get extremely low interest rates. These are things that likely, if it's buying a building or developing a new building, is something you finance over time, and not wipe out your fund balance. At least that's.
Well, I think that's a question that's something that I think we'd have to.
Well, that's the financial feasibility. We take a look at.
Right. So that's a whole part of the whole discussion, how we find it.
Yep. So move along.
The next is a multi-year capital spending plan. I think we brushed up on that quite a few times already in this meeting. So that concludes the list of Liz's questions that she presented to me. Moving on to the next board member, and that is Ben. So the first question here is why BACC is going from 10,000 to 16,000. In fact, it's not, but the account A7140, which is considered the youth center, which is where we do group the contributions that we do make to BACC. That particular parking lot is going in the works to create an ice skating rink for the winter. Now, that being said, there is additional cost in utilities and contractual expenses to get that up and running. And that's where that additional 6,000 is.
When did we make the decision to turn that into a skating rink?
We did not, we have not, but the school district has alerted us that they're likely not going to allow us to use the Eastern Avenue field anymore for our skating rink. And a good possibility for where we would move it is our property that we own immediately adjacent to BACC, which is currently a paved lot.
Well,
So,
I'd like us to consider potentially using that for parking instead. I mean, skating ring is wonderful, but it's used for a couple of months in the winter and then sits there empty, whereas additional parking for the village might be a higher and better use for that, particularly if we could get a shared parking agreement with the parking behind the other buildings. So just looking long range.
Yeah, I don't see why it can be used for both.
That's what I was wondering, can it?
Could it? I don't know. I've never seen, if you put, maybe it can. That would be a better solution, but I'd like, not to have it just be dedicated as a skating ring and then sit there for 9 months of the year as unusable space.
we will have those discussions if it turns out that we need to move forward on this project.
Okay, that's fine.
The next question was already discussed for Fund for the Arts. I think we can go ahead and skip that. Same with the following question about the pool expenses jumping. We did brush up on that particular question as well. Celebrations, we have 14,000 budgeted. I won't go item by item, but we do
already
have,
talked about that.
yeah, we do have money budgeted for the potential for Memorial Day parade, holiday decorations, Easter egg hunt. So a lot of those fun stuff. Yes.
We're anticipating we may be able to do the coming year.
Mhm.
Depending on how the pandemic goes.
Yes. The next is the water transportation and distribution. Why was only 169,000 spent through December 31st, 2020, but projected to spend another 315. Again, this kind of goes in line with what was actually spent up until December 31st versus what is going to be spent in the later years. Again, this is talking about fiscal year 2021, our current one. A lot of the big projects weren't done in the beginning of the year, but have been or are in the works to be expended by the end of this fiscal year. Number 6 from Ben was, what is the shuttle bus for $8,500 for seniors, or what agency is that with? It is with Community Human Services. I do believe they had a presentation, I want to say within the last year or a little over the last, in the past year, year and a half. It is a contract that we have with quarterly cost to the village, and I believe it's quote unquote the Wellness Express, so it is all inclusive of anyone who needs help getting to their appointments, but don't quote me on that because I don't know the exact
The Milton
logistics.
can also contribute to that. We all have a contractual agreement with the Wellness Express.
The next question is about the $200,000 capital project. That's been answered previously. Why is it under debt service category? And that is why a little bit I brushed up upon, but it is going to be moved into the H fund, capital improvements fund. That being said, when we do make a transfer to another fund, it's classified under the comptroller's eyes as a debt. Now, yes, we are paying towards another fund, but because that fund does not generate revenue on its own, it's quote unquote a debt for the taxpayer basis that our general fund is under. This one's just a statement about our revenue. Ben requested to have percent and change year to year for our revenue. I'll just state that I create the tentative budget and the proposed and adopted budget based off of the comptroller's request. I do believe a percent change is rather simple to calculate if anyone needed to find out the change in year to year.
Well, the bottom line on that one, Bill, is we've been catching up on past due water accounts, and we've closed out several accounts that were multiple $1,000 accounts, and those accounts are now closed. So that was a one-time shot of money that came in this year that's not going to be coming in again.
All right. Julie, you don't have to go through every question. There's some bigger items I think we should get to before it gets too late, and then we can go back if we want. So for example, the new administrative position.
Mhm.
Some of us are, so, I mean, I appreciate you going through, but I just was thinking there's some things on my mind that are bigger than the questions I asked. So, oops, I just lost you. So for example, the administrative position, sorry, my computer did something. In my mind, the 50,000, Mr. Mayor, is not enough for the level of the position and to get the range of candidates that we'd want to recruit. So I would suggest closer to say 75 for that position. And I know it adds to the budget this year, but I'm wondering if in a year or two, if positions open up, we could restructure a little bit and save some funding down the road. Potentially, the administrator could sort of figure out the best way to run the office. So anyway, that's my suggestion.
Yeah.
We have talked about various levels of funding, and I started out lower than this, and people have suggested higher than this. I think the only thing to do is advertise it at 50 and see what we get. If we have to raise it to get the person we want, then we have to raise it. But I personally know of at least a handful of candidates who would be very interested at that level.
Yeah, I guess for me, Larry, my only concern is I think that position is going to have ever expanding responsibilities and duties. And, at a point, my concern is, are we going to hire somebody at a certain level job description, and then as the job evolves is well beyond that and possibly well beyond their skill set?
Also, will they actually be directly supervising people? In the job description? There's some language there that it sort of implies that, but I wasn't sure.
We'll be working directly for me and implementing my administrative decisions. So that will require them to deal directly with staff, but only on my behalf.
Yeah,
All
but
right. I found the wording. It says oversees and coordinates the personal practices and work of all village employees. So is this person going to be official supervisor of these employees or not? And that'll be still
No.
you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The department heads are the supervisors of their departments, and I'm the supervisor of the entire village.
Okay.
but for government services, is that person going to be able to tell any one of the village staff, assign them a duty or give them a job to do, or will that come directly from you?
That'll come from me.
Okay, can I ask if the people you described that are, willing to work for this, are you looking for somebody on a more short-term basis? That would probably be somebody that might be, retired and wouldn't come with asking for a lot of benefits, etc. But also would not necessarily look at doing this for a long period of time.
None of the poor people who have approached me about this job just because the rumor mill let out that we were talking about it
Right.
have been elderly or retired or in any other way gave me the impression that they would be short-term employees.
So you're saying that they're folks that are looking for more of a career type position.
Yes.
Okay. And this will be publicly advertised, and I would assume similar to when we hired Julia, we each could partake in an interview and provide our opinion, because it's a pretty critical position. That we'd like to, see the candidates' qualifications and be able to comment.
Okay. But once again, we're straying from the question for the budget.
No, well, I've made my feelings known about this before. I think we do need, I think we need a pretty high caliber person to do this. I think it would be to have more of a professional operation. And I agree with Ben. I think you need somebody who's really got managerial, supervisory skill. And I don't have a problem paying for it. I think that, if we had to pay more for it, because I really think this is a very, very critical position. And I think
I agree. And there could be even more duties that befall on this person, like for instance, the water department overseeing and coordinating that and cleaning that up. There's a lot of other things that that would be capable of, and perhaps a little extra money in the pot, we would get somebody with a skill set to do those things.
The only issue is mentioned earlier, this is a recurring expense, and we have to cover it with recurring revenue or increase taxes. So, or take it out of somebody else's budget. So that's the issue. Just plainly, it is. I mean, I agree that I talked to a person in this type of position in Brockport, and she had a master's degree in public administration, and was a very capable person. But I also question whether you can get somebody. I would think maybe you could get somebody who was a retiree for that, because they don't need to have, they've got other income, and that might be advantageous. But if instead you're really looking for somebody who can grow into a position and be here for the longer term, that's going to cost more.
I think 50 grand for entry-level positions, pretty good money.
Well, do we want an entry-level person? I guess we're saying we don't want an entry-level person.
This job is not an entry-level position.
Yeah, I definitely, and I've written several emails on this. We definitely want somebody with at least some you know, even if you're not going to have this person supervise people directly, you want somebody who knows, who's done it and knows how to do it, even, you know.
And eventually maybe they will supervise somebody.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I think it is a little top heavy initially, but again, I would be hopeful that they could identify ways to save money over time and pay for themselves at
So,
some point.
And Larry, isn't the idea that this person can be in the office so you don't have to be there all the time?
Mhm.
Yes, I mean, right now. I'm
So
doing
so
now.
by that fact, they will be supervising.
Yeah, I mean, the job description from other locales is supervisory. They're
Mhm.
the ones who manage the office and make sure things get done so that you don't have to be there every day looking, you know, answering every question. They'll have the ability, they should be of the ability to be able to answer those questions and give direction.
So what are people suggesting?
We're suggesting, I think, positions that's not entry level, but at the supervisory ability level that pays
Management, management.
management level, yes, and pays at that level. I would suggest 75, somewhere in there, with the idea that they will identify ways to streamline and save costs over time, as well
Yeah.
as just improve village services.
I think that's probably a good benchmark. Obviously, we could do something commensurate on experience.
Right, right. Obviously, you're not gonna, right, you're not gonna pay the same amount of money for somebody who's got 2 years experience than you would if you have somebody who's got 10.
Right.
So where are we suggesting we get that additional 25,000?
Where are we getting the 50,000?
The 50,000 was able to be calculated within the tax cap. The tax cap has since been filed.
We cut a bunch of positions over the past few years and saved that much money.
And also you're adding some to DPW and we don't want to touch that.
I say we advertise salary commensurate with experience and we see what we get.
I would have to agree just because we don't have the money out.
We figure out where the other money's coming from then.
So we're going to find out, we are going to be able to secure the money if we find a candidate that it needs a minimum requirement above that 50,000 that the board feels is the most qualified candidate.
Well, it's going to be just as easy to find that money then as it is now.
Well, I mean, I guess if you don't want to fluctuate, if you want to stay within the tax cap, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who are of the theory that tax cap isn't, you know, shouldn't always be followed. But that's
Well, the one thing in regards to the tax cap is based off of when we need to adopt the budget versus when we need to override the tax cap. We're already past some of those deadlines.
All right, so that answers the question.
okay. So we can't
I
do
mean, we could,
Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I mean, for example, could we reduce the contingency fee by 25,000 this year?
We could, or if we wind up hiring somebody for 75, we could transfer 25 from contingency to the salary line.
At that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
we
the
want-
thing is we got to add the percent of benefits. That's an additional cost too. It's not just the salary. And remember, the
Percent of benefits that affects the village is, you know, related to employer portion of Social Security and Medicare. Anything else, I budgeted high for benefits such as health insurance and retirement. So that would have no significant impact on salary.
isn't it like 30% of salary, the benefits?
yeah,
Yes, and like I said, I budgeted high in anticipation for health.
Thank you.
from 50
Good
to
for you,
75.
Julia. You covered that base. Good
It
for you.
doesn't-
Thank you.
increase proportionately.
It doesn't. Okay. Right, that makes sense.
But there is some additional cost if you
Right.
pay
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So,
So, well, I think if we want somebody, the best person, and we're willing to spend up to 75, we should probably post it at 75 to attract the best people. Otherwise, the best people won't apply if 50,000 is less than they're willing to work for. So I think we sort of, tie one hand behind our back if we post it at 50, see what we get, and then we're like, well, these people are okay, but who knows what we would have gotten at 75.
Yeah, I think this is kind of more of a question for when it happens versus the budget at this point.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about the strategy about that. If we can keep that, I'm not entirely comfortable talking about the salary, in these specific terms right here,
Yeah, well.
that's not smart from an employer standpoint. So I think we should just.
Yeah.
Move on.
We
Yes.
know where we can find the money if we need it.
That's right. So that question's been answered.
and hope,
The other question I'd have is that if we passed a deadline for that change, perhaps this conversation should have been scheduled prior to that deadline.
yeah, I think we need to do the budgeting process differently next year. In order to allow us the flexibility that we need. So, and I'd like, as Christine says, you should have a policy, a way you're gonna do things and put it in writing and then do it. And not leave it, well, we'll do it this way one year and this way the next year. I think we need to get our way of doing village business, some of it down on paper. And,
Well, we have a budget calendar on paper.
yes, but what
Ask
happens,
the treasurer to revise it appropriately.
what happens in that calendar? I think, we could have done a little differently this time, but we'll make improvements next time.
Yeah, we can have a discussion about that.
Ben, was there any other questions that you had? Because you said some of them weren't important to touch up on.
Yeah, some of the others are sort of in Christine's bailiwick, the library fund. And Christine, you can talk to that, and also digitizing documents. I think we should just try to bite the bullet and see if we can get that done. But Christine, you want to talk about the library?
Yeah, I just wanted, and that's the only one of my questions that's outstanding. When we originally talked about this, we had agreed that we would do a capital fund. There was a whole list, and it was presented to the board a couple of years ago. It was presented during budget workshops of all the things, some of the minor, some of the major, and the facilities for improvements to the library, which I know I keep saying this, and that's probably very annoying, but it's the most visited, aside from the pandemic, it's the most visited and the most utilized building in the village. It has about 60,000 plus visits a year. But in any way, a lot of them prioritize as a safety, blah, blah, blah. All right, so the capital improvement, like we just put in a new door that is, and it has to be up to code. It has to be for the allowed for fire standards and all this sort of stuff. Okay, so we had said that there would be $10,000 a year for capital improvements. So we did that 2 years in a row. This year it's and 5,000. And the library does have some quote unquote funds of their own, which of course are with the village, but which they use. And these are things from donations and things like that. So when we do things, we have a combination of things from those funds and also the village funds, the capital improvements. So I would like to ask that we once again have the capital improvement of 10,000 rather than 5,000 for the library. Because that was a commitment. This would be the third year of the 5-year plan.
Well, excuse me, do you remember, Julia, what the library's request was for?
Yeah, it was for the bathroom repairs to make it, I guess, up to date, but also ADA compliant. I think it was brought to us at 10,000, but a lot of the work was shown that potentially the DPW could do. So that's why we reduced that down a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's not, yeah, well, okay. I don't, it's not necessarily what was brought to you, but that's not necessarily in the library. There's a whole list of things, and maybe I should have been more involved in what was presented to you for the budget this year. It's not necessarily going to go to the bathroom. There are other things involving safety that may be used. We have a huge, as you face the library on the left-hand side, we still have this problem with the roof and the ice and all of this stuff that builds up. That may be part of what's used. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, this year,
what?
I thought I remembered that was
Yes, we
done
did,
this year.
but it hasn't totally solved the problem.
Ah,
So what I'm saying is, I know you were told about the bathroom, but I think that was sort of, I'm not so sure. We do at some point want to do the bathrooms. Both of them
Yeah.
need to be done. I think that the concept is that what we need is, with the list of everything that has to be improved, we would like to use $10,000, some of which, if we're going to do 2 bathrooms, that's a $25,000 expense. Some of that's going to come from the village, and some of it's probably going to come from the library's donation funds themselves. So that's what we're requesting, $10,000.
okay, I didn't remember the $10,000 a year thing, and we thought we were giving the library what they asked for when we
I
made up the.
appreciate that. I'm sorry yeah, I should have, obviously I should have been more involved.
Yeah,
Can we take another 5 from somewhere, fund balance or something?
Unfortunately, library, it's its own fund.
Oh, right.
So it would have to come from its revenues or from another portion of the general fund, just because we do support the library. Now, that being said, it would have to come from another place.
Even though if it's a capital improvement, it can't be a fund balance, I mean, that doesn't
the
matter.
library's been running a negative fund balance.
Yeah, Julia and I can take a look at that
Right,
before
Okay.
next week.
okay,
Yeah,
all right.
but the library has not
Yeah.
been, I mean, from what I've seen, it looks like they've been running a negative fund balance every year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a negative every year, but it's close.
Close.
Yeah, they spend their money, that's for sure.
Any opportunity to get more money out of the towns or the school? So
No.
that doesn't
Well,
happen.
no, the school already gives us
And I
money.
did ask the town of Ballston the town of Ballston, because the town of Milton gives us contributions also. I asked the town of Ballston repeatedly for support for the library, for support for the pool, for support for something else that the town of Milton gives us support for, and I received a resounding no.
Well, then we can, well, not the library, but the pool, they don't, they can pay extra if they're not village residents, if they're not gonna contribute.
Huh?
No, I mean, not the library, because they don't pay, but
Okay.
like the pool, if your town is contributing, then you get a certain rate. If your town is not contributing, you have to pay a little more.
All right, well, that's a
Okay.
whole separate issue. Can we just stick with my trying to get this $5,000 for the?
Yeah, Julia and I will work on it.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Anything else at 9:02 that we need to discuss regarding the budget?
well, Ben asked about the records management, so let me just touch on that. We do have a proposal. There's a whole, it's not just as simple a thing as digitizing stuff. It's sort of like we have thousands and thousands of pounds of paper, and what you don't do is go in and digitize everything. First of all, it's like you throw things out before you move. Okay, so there's a whole process for this. We put together a grant. The grant was filed a couple of days before the pandemic. I don't know if we're going to get the grant. We filed it with the fire companies. That's in limbo, if you will. So we'll have to see about that. The $10,000, I don't know if we want to, it's in the budget. I appreciate it. I don't know. It's a drop in the bucket. I don't know if we can, if maybe I can talk to the people who were going to do the grant, we're going to be paid if we did the grant, and ask them what they think we could do if we don't get the grant with $10,000 and start. But it's really, I can tell, the grant was for close to $100,000. That's what's needed to get all of that stuff, some of it tossed, then digitized, a whole system set up, because it's all got to be done according to the rest, everybody's been bored about this before. It's all got to be done according to a certain schedule by the state archives. And there are certain things that you can't throw out, you can't digitize. It's a rubric in a book that it's about this thick.
Sounds like
Christine,
Yeah.
so there's laws saying that you have to throw out
No, there are
records?
laws saying that there's certain things that you can't get rid of.
Okay, so I guess I'm still missing why everything couldn't be digitized.
Because
then-
there are certain things that you want, it's a waste of money, Sean. There are certain things you don't want to digitize before
don't
you
wanna
get rid of it.
As 1946 water bills.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, I understand that, but has there been a cost analysis to somebody to sieve through and find all that versus somebody taking a pile of paper and feeding it into an auto feeder that just
we found.
scan?
That's what we had.
Pile is
That's
2
what we
rooms.
had the
full of
grant
forest
for.
land.
That's what we had the grant for, that they did the analysis of what it would cost to get this in order the way it's supposed to be according to rules and regulations established by the state archives.
Okay, I usually labor to pick through something is much more than a machine scanning 10 times the amount of
Right,
content it needs to.
But what I'm trying to communicate, and I probably am doing a very bad job about this because I'm trying to go fast, is there are certain things like there's a whole room of police records. You can't just have anybody picking through that stuff and scanning it. You can't. It has to be done in a certain way by certain people with skills. You just can't go in there with a scanner and digitize the whole thing.
it sounds like something that's not going to happen without a grant.
Right.
A lot of things aren't going to happen without a grant.
Well, it sounds to me that is the next phase renting permanent, semi-permanent storage and relocating it?
We may relocate it, but the first thing that you want to do is you want to thin it. You want to get rid of what you can get rid of before you don't want to store everything if you don't have to store it.
But we need
But
the
there-
grant,
and there are
we need the
people-
grant to do that, right?
Well, you need the grant. Yes, we would need the grant unless we're just going to store everything. But you
I
need.
mean, until you get the grant, relocate it, and then I'm just thinking,
You gotta-
that has to be relocated if you're gonna do any sort of improvements on the village hall.
Well, the proposal, well, at least we have some time because the proposal for improvements on Village Hall do not involve the 3rd and 4th floor.
Right.
So by the time we get.
This year,
What?
this year.
Right.
So we're gonna get the grant this year, then you're saying?
No, I'm saying that we can look at what that problem is. I don't know if we're going to get the grant, from your mouth to God's ears. But,
Right.
at least in the year that we have, we can figure out what we're going to do if we don't get the grant, if we're going to move it all.
I guess I don't wanna have the same conversation next year.
Right.
If we don't get the grant,
Neither
then
do
we should
I,
do.
Sean,
yeah.
Neither do I. And I can, honestly, I have done everything that I could not to have this conversation. But a pandemic.
And Christine, I am so happy you did this because it's not something that I would have been able to do. And I totally appreciate all your effort. It's just, I feel like this has become like an anchor around moving forward with anything, in regards to the village hall. And I'm just trying to find other solutions until it sounds like we can find a grant unless we want to take 100 grand out of the fund balance and
Not,
get it done.
Well, it's not a capital improvement. I'll tell you one thing, if we don't get the grant, well, then we're definitely going to have to get that kind of money to do it ourselves.
Okay, anything else for Julia on the proposed budget that we're gonna vote on next week?
I mean, has anything changed in this budget?
Nope, the only changes were what I mentioned earlier, and that was in regards to the tax cap. Ended up being 1,000 not in the village's favor, and then an extra 9,000 in the village's favor, which went directly to those water engineering studies. Other than that, there's been no changes.
No
It's
change
all-
in the line.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We're gonna try to find another $5,000 for the library
Yeah,
improvement.
sorry. Yep.
Christine, should that just come out of that paper fund?
You know something? I was gonna say that. I was gonna say if you can't, because I don't know if we're gonna get anything, accomplished without a grant, so if you want to do $5,000 for records, if you can't find it anyplace else, I mean, I'd still like to see if there's anybody we can get to, for some amount of money, like to do something with the records. Okay, so for that, maybe we could get, I mean, maybe these people, they haven't worked in a year. Maybe they'd be happy to do something with it for $10,000. But if all else fails and you can't find that 5,000, that's not a bad place to take it from.
We're going to 10 now?
Okay, we have 7 members of the public, down from, I think, 13 at its height, who have stuck with us for the entire 2 hours plus, and I'm gonna allow them the opportunity to make public comments. And I see a hand from Mark Bleck. And okay, Mark, you're still muted, but it's from your end.
I think that, am I on now?
You're on.
Okay, Mark,
Yes.
10 Thompson Street. I know there's no money at this point put towards the Wiswell Park project, but I also want to remind Liz that in September or whatever, the mayor and the trustees agreed to do a display, the birdhouse display, and destroying the park at this point would be it would be destroying the display. So I know BSPPA has moved their stuff, but no one has talked to me about moving the birdhouse project, and any sort of change in the park would be a contradiction in that agreement that the village trustees and the mayor made to me and to Saratoga Arts. So if you decide to destroy the park, I will have to bring up the point that you agreed to that contract. The other thing is, I know you put $1,000 for the birdhouse project and $1,000 for the banner project, and I've asked for more money, and I've sent you all emails to that respect that I haven't received any response from, which I don't understand. And I'll be quite honest, without more, and as I've told you all in my recent email, without more money, that project is dead. Both projects, the Christmas project, as I've told you all, and the public doesn't, the public that's on here wasn't savvy to to my email, that I put a great deal of money of my own into these projects, and I cannot do it again this year. And I can't do it again next year. It's just I've done this now for 4 years. My personal contributions to this village financially has been a lot of money. And if you wanted to proceed, then you have to commit some money to it. I've raised a lot of money. I've raised a lot of grants. I've gotten a lot of grants for it, but none of it covers what the projects cost. I'm a little I don't understand how you're putting $6,000 towards a skating rink for 2 months of skating at best, 2 to 3 months. When, the birdhouse project this year, we have 400 birdhouses sitting in my studio, ready to be put up. We have 60 banners ready to go up. These are projects that really become part of the community, market the community. The mayor's been on TV this year. We get a lot of write-ups and a lot of press. A lot of people have been sending emails to the mayor, showing their support for the program. And none of that can happen again. I mean, the program just can't happen under the financial situation the situation you guys are creating here. I can't spend my own money anymore. So again, next week, what you decide to do with the budget will depend. We'll make this decision whether or not we have any of the community art projects anymore. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bleck. I want to just reiterate what I've said many times, both in public and in private to you, and that is that your tremendous efforts on behalf of the village have been greatly appreciated by the board and by the populace and by the entire community. And we think you've done a marvelous job, and we have no desire to see that stop. So thank you very much. And we did have a couple of other hands, but I only see one now, so I'll recognize Gina Morosi.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Gina Morosi, are we giving addresses and all that? Are there notes?
No.
Minutes? Okay,
Nope.
So, all right, Gina Morosi. I have a few things I'd like to touch upon. The first one, seeing as how I'm following Mark, is I just want to support Mark and reiterate the importance of his project, projects, excuse me. They include the young and the old. They include disabled children, seniors that are shut in. It brings the community together. I learned the other day of him having to take money from his own pocket to make these projects work. I was at his studio, and not only does he get the supplies, make the birdhouses, distribute the birdhouses, get the birdhouses back, to store them at his residence. He then does the displays around the village. I really hope that we can find some more money to give to him, because these projects are really important and they're very good for the community. So I'll leave that. My next topic is the administrator, the office administrator that you're thinking of hiring. While I agree that I think you need help, Mr. Mayor, because I know the hours you put in for the ridiculous pay you get. I don't think it's a wise move to hire somebody and to categorize them pay-wise as more important than your clerk or your treasurer, which are also very important jobs. And they do not make close to the $75,000, and they've been there. So I think that the $50,000 would be a great starting point. And if you're going to increase salaries, I think that's something that you have to consider across the board, because the administrator is going to act, as I'm understanding it, is at your pleasure. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
Correct.
So you're really still overseeing this person. They are not going to have decision-making abilities. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, on the day-to-day things, once they learn the ropes and how things work, then they'll be expected to exercise a certain amount of oversight.
Right, but they wouldn't oversee somebody like your treasurer or your clerk, because they answer directly to you. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So I just think, in all fairness to all of your office employees, you might want to hold that line at 50,000 right now. The next thing, this fund balance that we've been fortunate enough to accumulate is being picked at like vultures at a dead squirrel. Everybody wants a piece of it. It's crazy. And like, I thought that the fund balance was being created and grown so that we could tackle major projects that we have coming up and fixing major things that are wrong in the village, such as the sewer system, such as the DPW building, which is literally falling apart, such as the DPW equipment. I thought that that was for major things like that. And there's 50,000 here, 100,000 there, 20,000 here. You're killing it. You're killing the ability to do these major necessary projects. And the last thing I'd like to discuss is Wiswell Park. I'm confused here because I think the cart was put before the horse. Events were moved before it was decided that this was going to move forward. I think partially doing the park and then waiting and hoping for a grant that we may or may not get. Where does that leave the park? Partially constructed? Is that a good look? I don't think that's a better look than what we have right now. So I say until we can secure the funding and have a definite plan, and I thought the community was having some input in this. I think that it's sad that the events were moved because those draw people to the center of the village. And as it looks right now, nothing's going to happen in Wiswell Park. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morosi. And I see one more hand now, and I'll recognize Rory O'Connor. Rory, yeah, good.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Yep, you're on.
Well, first of all, I would like to tell you how much I enjoyed the last 2 hours. And I want to compliment Julia and Larry as much as humanly possible. I can remember not too very long ago when the idea of being able to reference an expense by line item, by dot this and dot that, was a fantasy. It was easy to move money around back then because that's what they did. They paid no attention to how they did it or where it came from. So again, my compliments to you both on an outstanding job and an outstanding budget.
Thank you.
And I also have a memory, not too long ago, maybe about 3 years ago, there was an election held in this village. And one of the major issues was the financial ruin that the village was facing and how we were going to go bankrupt and everything was terrible and we were doomed. We couldn't even borrow money. Tonight, I listened to you people, the four of you, talk more about accessing the fund balance than I can possibly believe is even reasonable for intelligent adults to do. The most precious money that this village has is that fund balance. It didn't exist 2.5 years ago. It's now almost $2 million. Leave it alone. It's not your money, it's the people's money. And the people have a right to determine how it's spent. For you to sit there and talk about, let's grab a little here and grab a little there, or do this, or we really need to do that. No. Okay, that's called planning and budgeting in the future. It doesn't come from the fund balance. The fund balance is the most sacred money this village has, and you all four of you should respect it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. And there's one more hand up. And I'll recognize Bob Bush. You're on, Bob, but you're still muted from your end.
Hear me now?
Yes.
I only have one suggestion with the assistant for the village hall. You can go on a website and see what the area towns and whatnot are getting or paying for that type of employee by the name of the site is seethroughny.net. You go on there, I believe you go to payrolls, you see every payroll of every public employee of New York State. So what I suggest is you guys go look at that site, ask different towns, different villages, what they're paying, and go from there as far as the salary goes. But I do kind of agree with a previous comment about your clerk and so on and so forth, that if they're not making 50 grand or barely making 50 grand, they do a lot more work than what they're getting paid for. And that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bush. And we have one more hand. And I'll recognize Meredith Tower.
Hello, everyone. Tonight, I'm calling on behalf of the library board. I know it sounds like it might be able to find those extra $5,000 that we've had in prior years. And I just want to say that there's so much that we've done, so much that we still need to do, a lot of it related to safety and just upkeep of the building. And so I would really appreciate it if you could find it and put it back in the budget. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tower. Let's see. I'm showing one hand, but I can't find it. Still showing one hand. Nope, now I'm not showing any hands. Okay, so thank you to the members of the public who attended tonight. We appreciate your concern for the village and your participation in civic events. We appreciate those of you who spoke, as well as those of you who did not. And with that said, I will adjourn this meeting and I'll see everybody next week. Thanks for your contributions and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.